Much. As you all know, each conference has its critical moments, and this is one of them. We have our technical artists that try now to include Professor Jeffrey Sachs from New York. Professor Sachs, can you hear us?
I can hear you. A little bit of an echo, but I do hear you, and I see you very clearly.
Welcome. Just to give you an idea where you are here in St. Gallen, and you have here an audience of about 341 participants. They are all coming from the sustainability sector, about 60% are professionals and 40% are students. Professor Sachs, welcome.
Bravo. Thank you. And thank you for all of you working in the field of sustainable development. This is our year, and that's the main point that I want to emphasize right now. 2015, from a global diplomatic point of view, is a decisive year. It's almost by accident that the global diplomatic agenda of sustainable development has come together in an extremely concentrated and crucial period of time. We're going to have 6 months of summitry that can make a profound difference for the generation to come, even longer, in fact. That's for the following accidental reasons, in a way. In 2000, the world adopted Millennium Development Goals. They are ending this year. That was a 15-year period. And so there was already the start of an effort to decide on the next framework of global development. Now, in 2012, on the 20th anniversary of the Rio Earth Summit, governments got together to take stock. Where do we stand on the issues of sustainable development? It was a pretty grim meeting. It was the 20th anniversary of the Earth Summit, which arguably was the high point of the global environmental cause. And when the government officials looked back at the achievements of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, they saw a rather dreadful record, a failure to implement these 3 extraordinarily important treaties. So already in June 2012, the government said, we need to put sustainable development front and center of the global development agenda. And they set 2015 as the time to do it. As the MDG era ends, a new sustainable development goal era should begin. They announced that the world would adopt SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, as the organizing principle for global cooperation in the period 2015 to 2030. Now, in a parallel process, the governments were still trying to make something of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Remember, that was the apex of the treaties signed in 1992, and yet it has never been implemented. We are 23 years after, and no implementation. The Kyoto Protocol was stillborn when the United States did not join, and when Australia and Canada and other fossil fuel countries really refused to implement. Then the high hopes came in 2009 in Copenhagen, when it was thought, with President Obama newly elected, the world will quickly come together on an effective treaty. And everybody recalls the profound disappointments of Copenhagen. Well, when Copenhagen failed to produce a treaty, the government said, what are we going to do? And I think in this dire emergency, in the way governments do, they said, given this emergency, we will set 2015 as our target date for an agreement that was 6 years later to go into effect in 2020. This is really the accelerated time path we're on. But it means that this year's negotiation on climate is the focal point. Indeed, I would say it's the last chance for an effective multilateral agreement to implement the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. It is the last chance, ladies and gentlemen, in one very precise sense. The world rightly has said that 2 degrees Celsius is the upper limit of warming within which we can even consider ourselves to have some safe room for maneuver. So back in 2009 and 2010 in Cancun, the government said, we agree that the warming must be kept below the 2 degrees C upper limit. The Paris negotiations this December are effectively the last chance to hold to that 2 degrees Celsius upper limit, because we are running out of space. 2014, as you know, was the warmest year in the instrument record. We're essentially halfway to the 2 degrees C. There's a lot of thermal inertia built into the system. The carbon budget in order to stay below 2 degrees Celsius is brutal. There's only about 1,000 billion tons of carbon dioxide left that can be emitted within the 2 degrees C upper limit, and we're emitting at a rate of about 36 billion tons per year globally. We have well under 30 years left. In other words, we have to move decisively to deep decarbonization and to a zero net carbon energy system by around 2070, according to the IPCC. So Paris is that second moment of high diplomacy. December, the COP21, it's a make or break summit. Then the government said, well, look, we're going to adopt sustainable development goals at the United Nations in September 2015. We're going to adopt, or we must adopt, a climate agreement in December 2015. How are we going to implement this? And of course, making the financial system redirected towards putting finance towards sustainable development, not towards unsustainable development, is fundamental. So they added a third negotiation, the Finance for Sustainable Development negotiation, which will culminate in a summit in Addis Ababa, July 12 to 15. The goal there is both about public finance and private finance, to move finance towards paying for the things we need, investing in the future, in low carbon energy, sustainable agriculture, smart cities, electric vehicles, and shifting finance away from the things we absolutely must not have: new oil drilling, deep sea hydrocarbon exploration. The fact of the matter is, as you know well, we have more than enough hydrocarbon reserves now. We should not be adding any new reserves. We should be moving to wind power, solar power, hydroelectric power, which, of course, your country knows very well, and other zero carbon energy sources and energy uses, such as mass electrification of vehicles and getting out of the internal combustion era. So 3 packed summits: July on finance, September, a 3-day head of state summit to adopt sustainable development goals, and December, the COP21, to agree on a climate package that can truly keep us below the 2 degrees C upper limit. Finally, let me just introduce one component of how we hope to proceed and to have St. Gallen as a partner and you as close partners. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon asked me just after the Rio +20 summit in 2012 to help him and the United Nations to organize a knowledge network that can be ready in 2015 to be a knowledge network for the period 2015 to 2030 on practical solutions to achieve sustainable development. So we formed what we call the UN SDSN, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And this is a worldwide network especially of universities and think tanks, research laboratories, with partners in civil society, government, international agencies, and business to identify, test, demonstrate, and help scale up practical solutions to the challenge of sustainable development. One of our flagships this year, for example, is what we call the Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project, where around the world, teams of energy experts are working on showing the practical technology pathways to deep decarbonization by mid-century en route to zero net carbon energy systems by 2070. You know, the bottom line is it can be done because solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, carbon capture and sequestration, and other technologies permit us to move to a zero net carbon system if we're smart and if we invest heavily in the research, development, demonstration, and diffusion needed to transform the world's energy system. Well, this SDSN has hundreds of university chapters around the world now. You can go to the website www.unsdsn.org. We have many national chapters. Recently, I inaugurated the German chapter, the Spanish chapter. We have many regional chapters, such as the Sahel chapter, which we just launched in Dakar a couple of weeks ago, in Turkey, in Korea, in Southeast Asia, in the Amazon basin. We'll launch an Andean SDSN this summer, and we are very keen on extending a partnership for efficacy and for practicality. I've been the UN's advisor on the Millennium Development Goals during the past 14 years, and it took a long time for governments to become sensitized to the Millennium Development Goals. We're working already in 2015 to help sensitize governments to the new Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, even before they are launched this September. Let me close here by again thanking St. Gallen for letting me join you and for asking you to contact me or contact the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We have a lot of work to do. You're lucky I normally carry on much too long, but in this case I must not because my train is about to leave and I have to catch it to meet some congressional group in Philadelphia in just in an hour. So I want to thank you very, very much. Congratulations for being leaders in sustainable development, and I look forward to future collaboration. Thank you very much.